head to the polls and cast your ballot, who are you actually voting for? The person, the party, the platform they promised you? It's a huge question in our democracy, and it gets thrown into the spotlight whenever a politician does something pretty shocking. They switch sides. We're going to dive into this controversial practice in Canadian politics known as floor crossing.
All right, here's what we're covering. We'll start with a really recent, very surprising switch, then zoom out to look at a wider trend that's literally reshaping Parliament. From there, we'll unpack what Canadians really think about all this. We're going to explore the arguments on both sides, see if the rules can even be changed, and wrap up with the big one, the fundamental question of voter trust. You know, to really get why this issue can ignite such a firestorm, we don't have to look any further than the longtime Conservative Member of Parliament, Marilyn Gladu. Okay, listen to this. Back in January of 2026, Marilyn Gladu was on the record very publicly backing a petition, and that petition was designed to force any MP who switches parties to face voters again in a by-election. Her principle seemed crystal clear. Voters should get the final say. And then, boom, less than 3 months later, this happened. Gladys crossed the floor to join the very same government she'd spent years fighting against. The move was just stunning, not just because she switched, but because it was a total contradiction of what she herself had said just weeks earlier. It immediately made everyone ask, what on earth could have happened to cause such a huge reversal? But here's the thing. As shocking as Gladu's move was, it wasn't a one-off. Not even close. It's actually part of a much bigger story. A story that is actively changing the balance of power in Ottawa and propping up a pretty fragile minority government. Get this. In just 5 months, 5 opposition MPs, 4 of them Conservatives and 1 from the NDP, have all ditched their parties to join the governing Liberals. This is not a slow trickle, people. This is a rapid-fire wave of defections that has completely shaken up the political landscape. So let's just make sure we're all on the same page. What is floor crossing? It's exactly this. An MP who you voted for as, let's say, a Conservative, just decides, in the middle of their term, to become a Liberal. They don't have to resign, and they don't have to face a new election. They keep their seat, their salary, their vote in Parliament. But now they represent a totally different party. And this is why this specific wave is such a massive deal right now. Prime Minister Mark Carney's Liberals have a minority government. That means they need help from other parties to pass laws and, frankly, to stay in power. But with these 5 new members, they've basically built themselves a near majority. Not because you voted for it, but because of a handful of individual defections. It completely changes the result of the last election. So that begs a huge question, right? If the system allows this, how do the people who are supposed to be the system, the voters, actually feel about it? Well, the answer shows there's a massive disconnect. Just look at this number, 26%. That's it. So what does that represent? Well, it's the tiny, tiny fraction of Canadians who are actually cool with the way floor crossing works right now. Yep. According to recent polling from the Angus Reid Institute, only about 1 in 4 Canadians supports the status quo. So an overwhelming majority, we're talking almost 3/4 of the entire country, thinks that when an MP jumps ship, something else has to happen. And this chart breaks down exactly what they'd rather see. The number one choice, with 41% support, is to force that MP to resign and run in a by-election. Give the local voters that redo that Marilyn Gladu herself was talking about. After that, 22% say they should have to sit as an independent, and another 11% think they should just have to give up their seat entirely. Now, this is where it gets absolutely fascinating. You can see just how much the political situation changes how people feel. Back in 2018, a Liberal MP crossed over to the Conservatives. And at that time, a majority of Conservative voters, 57%, thought floor crossing was okay. Fast forward to today, when the traffic is all going the other way. Whoa, that support has nosedived to just 14%. It really shows that your opinion on the principle can change pretty fast, depending on whose team is winning. So this brings us right to the heart of it all. It's a fundamental debate between an MP's personal freedom and the collective will of the voters. If you look at it from the MP's perspective, they argue they have a right to freedom of association. One of the floor crossers, Chris d'Entremont, talked about a more open and collaborative culture in the Liberal caucus. They'll say they can actually do a better job for their constituents by being on the government side. But for voters, it often just feels like a straight-up betrayal. It looks like a backroom deal that just goes around their choice at the ballot box and completely undermines the election results. And this public cynicism isn't exactly helped by what looks a lot like political rewards. Shortly after these MPs made the switch, some pretty tangible benefits just happened to follow. Big funding announcements for their ridings, appointments as special advisors, spots on fancy international trade missions. Now, the government swears this is just business as usual, but the timing? It definitely fuels the suspicion that these aren't just coincidences, but payoffs. Okay, so if most Canadians can't stand the current system, why hasn't it been changed? Well, it's not because nobody's tried. Over the years, bill after bill has been introduced to try and force a by-election for any MP who switches parties. But guess what? Every single one of them has been defeated. It turns out, governing parties, both Liberal and Conservative, have consistently voted them down. They seem to prefer keeping the option of poaching members from the other team in their back pocket.
But the fight over our democratic rules is very much alive. It goes way beyond just floor crossing. It touches the very system we use to elect our governments in the first place. In fact, just look at the recent Liberal National Convention, where the governing party itself was debating two completely different visions for the future.
On one side, you had a proposal for a 50+1 system, probably using ranked ballots. Critics basically call that a self-serving reform that's designed to help the Liberals win. But on the other side, there was a call for a citizens' assembly to design a system of proportional representation where a party's seats would actually match its share of the national vote. It's the classic political battle, right? Self-interest versus a bigger democratic principle.
Ultimately, all of this stuff, the party switching, the accusations, the failed reforms, it really all boils down to just one thing: the erosion of voter trust. So what happens when these MPs finally do have to face the voters again? Well, history gives us a pretty good idea of what their chances look like. That's right. Even though there are no official rules to force them out, voters often deliver their own sentence at the ballot box. Studies have shown that only about a third of MPs who cross the floor actually manage to get reelected with their new party. The public might not have a formal recall button, but they definitely have a memory. Which leaves us with this central dilemma, doesn't it? When an MP crosses the floor, who are they really working for? Is it the people who elected them based on a very specific set of promises? Is it their own conscience? Maybe they believe they can do more good somewhere else? Or is it really just about the political interests of their new party? The law might see an MP as an individual, but voters are increasingly seeing their ballot as a kind of contract with a party and its platform. And when that contract gets broken without their permission, it challenges the very legitimacy of the whole system. This quote really forces us to ask, when does political strategy cross a line and become, as the author puts it, theft of a democratic choice? It's definitely something to think about.